Um, well, hello everybody, and welcome to the August meeting. It's Richard Brett here. Hope everybody's staying safe and well. This is our fourth meeting on Zoom, and the other three have been very successful, and we're sure that this one will be as well. Now, what we'll do in a moment is just to switch off everybody, or rather to mute everybody. So that, well, yeah, there we are. And can everybody still hear me? Yeah, good. Really just so that there are no accidental interruptions during the talk. There will be time at the end to ask questions or raise any issues. So at that point, obviously, we can unmute people as necessary. One thing I'd just like to mention is that a newsletter went out yesterday. Karen sent out a newsletter, and there were three quite important or quite urgent articles in there. One was about the renewal subscriptions, which are coming up on the 1st of October. Another one was about our AGM, or rather our lack of it. It actually won't be happening now until next spring. So if you haven't read those articles yet, they are probably worth reading. So they were in the newsletter which went out yesterday. There's a third article in there which is also a bit urgent, and that's about the National High Street project. This is a project that's the U3A nationally is trying to get going, and the idea is that, you know, as we know, shopping habits have changed quite a lot since the lockdown. And the U3A nationally is trying to put together a project to work out exactly what's going on and what the trends are and how significant the changes are. So if anybody would like to take part in that, there's a link in the newsletter. But what we will need to do, I think, is to respond as a U3A. So if anybody is interested, then please get in touch with me or get in touch with Karen or anybody else on the committee, and we will try and pursue that as we can. But it is quite urgent because I think we're hoping to get everything up and, well, get the project members in place by early in September. Anyway, back to the business of the day. I'm sure we're going to be very interested in the talk this afternoon, and we can welcome Emma Williams, who is a community fundraiser for Marie Curie. Now, Emma covers Hertfordshire, and in doing so, she supports the local community with fundraising, providing awareness about the charity, and working in conjunction with a network of volunteers to deliver funds for the charity. So I'm unmuting Emma, and Emma, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, thank you all so much for having me at your meeting and having me join you virtually, which is fantastic. It's great that you've managed to, as a group, come together online with Zoom, with the help of Zoom, to make sure that you're not kind of missing out on those meetings, which is brilliant. So I'm really pleased to be able to be virtually talking to you all today. As Richard mentioned, I am a community fundraiser for Marie Curie. I actually am over quite a way away over in Yorkshire at the moment. I usually cover North Yorkshire, the area, and look after the fundraising and volunteers over that direction. But we have had a reduced number of staff with going on the furlough scheme. So I'm currently covering Hertfordshire as well. So I'm really, it's been great to get to know all of the fundraising that goes on and support the volunteers around where you all live. So Yeah, so I've kind of got the knowledge of the Yorkshire, how Marie Curie is in Yorkshire, but I'm going to also make it as local as I can to the services near to you in Hertfordshire as well. So yeah, so I'm a community fundraiser. So what that means is I go out into the community. I'm often in this bright yellow colour. And as you can see, as Richard noticed, I'm surrounded by collection tins. So yeah, I'm usually out in the community, supporting collections, giving talks, making people aware of the services that we have, and motivating people to fundraise for us, and also, if they need our help, to know about what there is there. So with the current times and the pandemic, my role has changed significantly. Obviously, it's very different for us as community fundraisers, being kind of stuck at home. We're all working from home, and at a time when our fundraising's been more crucial than ever before, we really have been limited, and everything's been put on hold, as you can imagine. I know that's no surprise, and that there's been a lot out there about how charities are going to be hit and that kind of thing. And the immense strain that is put on charities and on their services. But we're really proud that all of our services have continued to run throughout the pandemic, and that we've have had an active role to play in supporting the country in the duration of the pandemic. All the services are still running in Hertfordshire. And what I'm going to try and do today is give you a bit of an idea about what usually goes on in Hertfordshire and across the country, and how that's kind of changed and altered in the new world that we live in. So Marie Curie is the leading charity for terminal illness. We used to be called Marie Curie Cancer Care. So a lot of people, rightly so, have the understanding that we care for people living with cancer. But we do also support people living with, about 30% of our patients are people living with any kind of terminal illness, whether that be dementia or motor neurons disease. So that's something that some people don't necessarily know as much. I imagine there's some people here who already know quite a bit about the charity, and then others who might not know much at all. So I'll do my best to try and give you all something that you didn't already know, but I will try and do a bit of a synopsis of what we do, so that you all have that kind of level of knowledge as well. Obviously a global pandemic makes living hugely complex, but particularly living with a terminal illness becomes hugely complex, because patients aren't able to see their families, and that service provision is that much more tricky, more difficult, really. It's also our role at Marie Curie has been really, really important to take the pressure off the NHS at that time as well. One of the main services, the Marie Curie nursing service, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, really, really aims to keep people at home and not be going into hospital, as that's many people's real wish. So obviously with the pandemic, that's more important than ever, keeping people safe and at home and ensuring that they can get that care without having to leave their house as well. So not going to be able to cover everything in the next kind of hour or so about the charity, but I'll do my very best to give you a good snapshot. I also thought I'd just mention, as I go along, I might mention a few different bits and bobs which you might want to know more about or follow up on. What I'll do is I'll send Richard an email after this talks with a few links for the things that I've mentioned, and I'll have all my contact details there so you can get in touch if there's anything else that you want to know more about. Now, I know when I first heard from Janice about the talk that you had booked today, she'd hoped to hear a little bit about Marie Curie, the feminist icon, as well. So I thought I'd just start with a few bits about the woman who gave the charity its name, and then about how the charity began as well, just as a bit of background. So despite having a very French sounding name, she is a Polish scientist, or she was a Polish scientist. She was the youngest of 5 children. Her parents were school teachers, but as a family, they were quite poor. Marie Curie's mother died, and her father couldn't support her and her siblings any longer. So she then became a governess and started reading and studying in her own time. She had a real passion for it, and she really wanted to kind of quench her thirst for knowledge. And that's something she never lost. She always had that the whole way through her life. She grasped the opportunity to go to university and moved to France in 1891, hence why she's got the French sounding name. And she actually funded her own place while she was at university, at Sorbonne University in Paris. She read physics and maths there, and it was while she was at university that she met her husband, Pierre Curie, who was a scientist working in the city. After they'd met, they married a year later, and she then adopted her name to be Marie, to be sounding the French spelling of her name. So many people don't realise that she was Polish as well. So the Curies, Pierre and Marie, began working together. They were both scientists, and they became research workers at the School of Chemistry and Physics in Paris. And that's where they began pioneering their work into invisible rays that were given off by uranium. And that's really where her work began with the fight against cancer. Now, she was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. That was in 1903, and she received that prize for physics. And she did go on to receive another Nobel Prize. So yeah, it was incredible that she'd kind of been the first woman to do this, and then went on to win another as well. Her husband Pierre in 1906 had a tragic death, and she and her 2 children, she was there to support her 2 children, but it didn't stop her from doing all of her research and studies that she had always endeavoured to do. She then went on to win her second Nobel Prize in 1911, and this was in chemistry, and it was for creating a means of measuring radioactivity. So one thing which is amazing is that during the First World War, Marie Curie worked to develop small mobile X-ray units that could be used to diagnose injuries near the battlefront. She actually worked with her daughter Irene, who was then aged 7, at casualty clearing stations close to the front line, and she used this X-ray machine to locate fractures and bullets and shrapnel that the wounded men came in with. Sadly, she did die as a result of her work with radioactive substances in 1934. But the kind of legacy that she left obviously has gone on to save thousands of lives. So yeah, a truly incredible woman. I've just noticed now that I haven't actually shared my screen, and I do have some photos to go alongside what I'm saying. So I'll just try and do that now and see if I can get a thumbs up as to whether you can see. Yes, wonderful. So I'll just do that because there's a few photos as I go along, as I said. There we go. In the yellow there, as always. Okay, so these are the pictures here of Marie and her husband Pierre, and this was her when she was much younger as well. And there with her 2 children, and here this is Marie working with her daughter Irene. Lovely. So where is the link then from the charity and the scientist? So the UK charity Marie Curie's original links are to the Marie Curie Hospital in Hampstead. So the hospital was a pioneering hospital opened in 1930, which specialised in the radiological treatment of women suffering from cancer and allied diseases. And it was built around the work that Marie Curie had done, hence why it was named after her. It was staffed by medical women, and it cared for over 700 patients every year, with facilities for radium and X-ray therapy, and it had modern pathological and research labs as well. So that hospital in Hampstead was built in Marie Curie's honour, but sadly, just 14 years after it opened in 1944, it was hit by a direct hit in an air raid, and the hospital was pretty much ruins after that. So the war finished and a group of people came together wanting to rebuild that hospital in Hampstead. And so the committee of people who wanted to rebuild the hospital came together, and they decided that they wanted to separate Marie Curie from the new NHS and have it move into the kind of charitable medical field. They went and consulted with Marie Curie's daughter and got the go-ahead, and that is where the Marie Curie Memorial Foundation was formally established, which is the beginning of the charity that we know today as Marie Curie. Later that year, the charity received its first ever donation, which was a diamond engagement ring, at the time sold for £75, which today would be about £2,000. And fundraising has gone on from there. We've had the support of the public, people giving weird and wonderful things over the years to the charity, and also people supporting by fundraising and giving as well. So there is actually a lovely story that about a gentleman who left. He was a very, very wealthy gentleman, and he left the whole of his estate to the charity because they had cared for his mother in her final days. And he left his whole estate to the charity under one condition, which it said in his will: you can have everything from the charity apart from the champagne in the cellar, and you can only have the whole estate if you deliver a bottle of champagne to each of my friends. And he left a list for who he wanted each of the champagne bottles to be left to. So yeah, weird and wonderful things over the years, but it all started with that, with the diamond engagement ring. So there are 6 main services that we offer at Marie Curie, and they mostly go across the whole of the country. But what I'll try and do is give you a good idea of what you've got locally there in Hertfordshire as well. So as I said, we're the leading charity for terminal illness, and the 6 main services you can see here on the screen. The first one, and the most prevalent in local to you guys, is the Marie Curie nursing service. So the Marie Curie nursing service aims to, as I said previously, to keep people receiving end-of-life and palliative care in their own homes and to keep them out of the hospital environment. The nursing service covers the whole of Hertfordshire. So any postcode, any location you're in Hertfordshire, you can get a Marie Curie nurse if you need it. The nurses are just absolutely incredible people. They come in to give pain relief and palliative care, but they really come in to give a sense of, to kind of ease people's worries and to be there as a real support network. And quite often, if the patient has a family around them, the impact that the nurse will have on the family is almost, you know, it's just as important, if not more, as the care she gives to that patient on the evening as well. So typically the nurses would make a call to the family around 9 o'clock in the evening, and then they'd head over to the patient's house and be there for 10 o'clock, make sure that the patient was feeling nice and comfortable, at ease, and if there is a family or a caregiver there, that's their moment to then to go up and get some much needed respite, as if they've been caring for their loved one over that time. The nurse will stay throughout the night, and we often hear of incredible kind of conversations that the nurse and the patient will have, and it's a really, really special and important relationship there that goes on to really, you know, so many of our supporters go on to say that the nurse really did change the end of that person's life. Meanwhile, the loved one may be asleep and being able to refresh, and then the next morning they have that kind of energy and sleep so that they can enjoy those final moments a little bit more. The nurse will usually stay till about 7 in the morning, and they might come back the next evening, or come back as long as they need to. So as you can imagine, during the pandemic, our nursing service was something that was hugely, hugely important for people who didn't want to leave the house, and may have now have been on their own as well if their loved ones couldn't visit. We're really proud to say that the nursing service completely continued. It didn't stop anywhere in the country, and hospitals easing that pressure, and also giving people, you know, at such a worrying time, giving people that reassurance as well. So last year in Hertfordshire, our nurses made 1,747 visits to different patients across Hertfordshire, to people living with a terminal illness and their families. They provided over 15,000 hours worth of care, allowing loved ones to get that respite, and in turn creating a more comfortable context for the end of life. So we, as I will say in a little bit in a moment, we do kind of strive to reach as many people as we possibly can and provide this care. But there are still people out there who don't get the care and support that they need at the end of their life. Nationally, it's around 1 in 4 who don't receive the care and support that they need. Largely due to kind of lack of services, gaps in services, lack of awareness, and lack of provision as well. But Marie Curie actually estimates that in East Hertfordshire, there's about 902 people that could benefit our support. So there are a lot of people out there who we're hoping to be able to reach. We've just got to keep on raising money to be able to do so. So I'll speak a bit more about our nurses as we go on, but the other services that we offer nationally are our Marie Curie hospices. Now, I'm actually in the Marie Curie hospice over in Bradford today in Yorkshire. It's an absolutely fantastic place. We have all of our hospices have inpatient and outpatient units. The inpatient units are each hospice will have a number of beds which people can come and stay here. But we also have services where people can come in for therapies, for pain relief, for physio. There's a gym, there's a hairdresser, those kind of things in the community that you might not be able to access quite as easily if you're living with a terminal illness. There's a family and social network team here as well, who offer bereavement support and support to families, many of which will continue to visit the hospice, and a huge number who go on to volunteer and look after the garden or come in and help do sessions and things like that. So it's just a fantastic environment here. It really is brilliant. There's 9 hospices across the country offering day and overnight care. The closest to you is the Hampstead Hospice, which is actually the one that was the first hospice that was rebuilt, which I mentioned a moment ago. But there's then 9 across the country. So our next service here is the Marie Curie Helper Service. So this was started out a few years back now, with the aim for volunteers to go into patients' homes and support people living with a terminal illness, particularly those living on their own, helping with everyday tasks, going out and doing some shopping, even just having a cup of tea and a chat. Those relationships become really solid, and they're really important for many people who are a part of this helper service. It did initially start as a pilot to see how it was going, and it's actually been piloted here in West Yorkshire. And that is something that is being rolled out further. So it's something that we're going to see more of across the country, hopefully helping more people in their own homes with those little tasks, everyday tasks, kind of once or twice a week. And then the next, so I've done Marie Curie nurses, the helper service and the hospices. Now the other services are research, which is a big leg of the charity, which people might not necessarily know about. So we're the leading charitable funder of palliative care and end-of-life care research in the UK. We believe as a charity that by investing in research, we can improve care across the whole of the country, and we can also improve our services. Not only improving just our services, but how that looks in the whole makeup of palliative care in the country. So usually across the country, there's different research projects going on. For example, there's recently been a research project about the palliative care needs of people living with motor neurons disease and their informal caregivers. That was done in association with the Motor Neurons Disease Association. And the findings from that are amazing, really. One of the big things that came out of that research project was that the diagnosis of motor neurons disease, quite often the palliative care element of that doesn't come right up until the very end of that person's life. So the very end of life preparation won't necessarily kick in until a few days before that person dies. And that's something that the caregivers and the patients have said, you know, that needs to be happening from the moment of diagnosis, really. And if that does happen, it can really improve the services that are available to people living with motor neurons disease. So as you can see, those research projects really can help feed into how we can ensure a better end of life experience for everybody across the country. Having said that, one real kind of problem that's happened is that when the country went into lockdown, many of our research centres had to shut, and many of them that would have been able to keep on running with the research running also wouldn't have been able to, because many of those carrying out the research are actually clinicians who were needed and then taken back onto the front line. So their research was put on hold. They were moved back onto the front line to help support the pandemic, and those projects are kind of now on pause. But that didn't mean that the Marie Curie research team was totally put on pause. Instead, what we've actually recently found is that the research team have proactively started some new research projects for those people that aren't working on the front line. For example, there's been a new research project set up with light of the pandemic for it's a confidential service for clinicians and medical professionals, And what you have to do is when you're working on the front line or at the end of a shift or mid-shift, you can log on to this confidential area and you can give your thoughts and feelings anonymously about how your context has been, the emotions that you're feeling, what impact that has on you, so that we can really understand what it is like for these medical professionals and what kind of a knock-on effect that's going to have in the future for them. So they can go on, they can give their thoughts online, they can write it in a kind of instant messenger. You can record a video and then that's taken, the speech is clipped anonymously, and we're going to have researchers looking at that to see how we can better support our doctors and our medical professionals across the UK. There's also been some research into one of our child psychologists who was doing a research project for us, has actually now started on a research project around bereavement and how that's going to look for the whole of the UK, and with dealing with grief in this way, like we never have had to before. Looking at the different pandemic research that's out there from previous pandemics, and actually that's really limited, and there's nothing kind of quite like that in our recent times. So there's a huge network of research that will be going on there as well. So some really interesting things, even though the current projects had to be put on hold as well. The next thing is the information and support service. So as the main leading charity for terminal illness, we think that it's really, really important that anybody living with a terminal illness or supporting somebody with a terminal illness, who from the moment they have that diagnosis, if you've got any questions, if you're looking for an answer, having had that diagnosis, we think that it's really important that you can receive that answer. It's a really, really scary thing to go through, and many people looking for. We think that as kind of the leading charity, that it's our responsibility to be able to provide that information and that support for people who are going through that. Now, it's a really personal thing, so it looks really different for different people. But we've got useful information and guidance which can be accessed online. It can be accessed over the phone, via text, instant messenger, booklets. We do a number of different booklets like this. And you can get in touch in any way or do a Google and hope that Marie Curie will come up and have that answer for you. So this was launched about 5 years ago. Last year we had, there's a telephone line that you can ring, which I'll send out the number for as well. And you can ring that for practical support, for clinical information, for emotional support, bereavement support. And it's a free number to ring, and you can be directed to either a service provision, or it can just be a listening ear for somebody to speak to you and hear, you know, kind of give you that reassurance and that guidance. One thing that was improved to the service last year, we now have one Marie Curie nurse on the end of every line, so that if somebody is a caregiver for somebody living with a terminal illness and they've got a clinical question, they can ring up and they can actually speak to a nurse then and there to get that support as well. So it has really evolved over the years, and the information and support services that are available there have really evolved over the pandemic as well, which I'll say a little bit more about in a moment. As I said, you can order these booklets online, and there's some really, there's a whole different range of publications which I'll send the links out for. There's this one's getting care and support, so kind of getting that care and support. But there's other ones around supporting somebody with a terminal illness, what to expect from the diagnosis, what to expect at the end of life, So yeah, so if you're someone who doesn't, you know, pick up the phone and want to talk, you can order one of these as well. The really important thing about my job as well is to make sure that people know about all of these things, so that anybody going through terminal illness can access these things and hopefully have that support as well. And then finally, the last service of the 6 is campaigning. So we influence decision makers on issues affecting people living with a terminal illness, because and we kind of rely on the public's help to ensure that we can keep end-of-life care on the political agenda. Now, obviously politics has been very full on in recent years, what with Brexit and then the pandemic as well. But our role as a charity is to really try and keep that conversation of end-of-life care and terminal illness on that agenda, and make sure that we are, you know, we're making people's voices heard and supported. As I said earlier, 1 in 4 people don't get that support they need, and as a charity, we just don't think that's good enough. Yeah, we launch a few different campaigns, kind of every year or so when they're needed to. We launched last year a Talk About campaign, which I'm not sure if anybody had seen at the time. So that was, the idea is to get people talking about death and dying, and to kind of stop it from being such a taboo subject. Our goal really is to encourage a conversation and make talking about death a normal part of life. In turn, the end result is that we'll make, we can have better end of life experiences for everybody. People will know what their loved ones want for themselves and what their last wishes are, and then it's more likely to be followed and a better end of life had at the end of this. So we're hoping that we're kind of hoping to have normal conversations across the UK, so that we can get people talking and prepare for the best end of life care. As I said, as the largest non-NHS provider of end of life care, we are the experts in it, and if we don't influence a good end of life for everyone, then who will? So that's kind of how the Talk About campaign began. There's a lovely area online which I'll share around, with some great kind of conversations on there, stories, blogs about the Talk About campaign, and I'll share that so you can go on and have a look. There was also, these were created, which are conversation cards, which were brought out to try and get people talking. So it's a deck of cards, and each one has a question on it, and you can use them as a way to start the conversation, really, with loved ones and family and friends. And there's some really lovely ones, like that one there, describe your perfect day. And then there's some other ones which are more kind of complete the sentence, at my wake the food will include. So there's a kind of whole different breadth of questions in there, and these can be ordered for free online as well, so I'll send that out. They're a really good tool. So that's the campaigning team, but I will touch on a few other things that they do as well in a moment. So, and also I was going to say, we've got these Marie Curie support line cards, which have got, they're like business cards, which have got the support line number on. And I'd usually, if I was coming to talk to you face to face, I'd bring some of these along so you could just keep one in your wallet. And if you ever know of somebody who might need our support, you've got that number to hand. So I can always send you some of those out as well if you think it would be beneficial to have some. Lovely. So now I'll talk a little bit more about the current position of the charity and what kind of happened as the pandemic began. we've been, since the pandemic began, we've been working flat out in partnership with the NHS to make sure that we can respond to stop the NHS being overloaded. We managed to free up intensive care beds needed mostly for coronavirus patients. And we've explored all options to ensure that we can be there to support people, families, and the NHS as well at the time. But whilst trying to do that and striving to support the country as best we can, at the very same time, we faced devastating loss to our income. Whilst the frontline teams were working around the clock, day and night, to meet the need, we have to raise, as fundraisers, we have to raise £13,888 every hour, 24 hours a day. So it's been a real challenging time, whereby our services have been so relied on, but our fundraising has been completely stopped due to the pandemic as well. I don't know if any of you know or have been involved with before the Great Daffodil Appeal, but that usually runs, it's kind of the peak time for it is March, and it runs kind of February to April time. We hit the streets and go out fundraising in shops and supermarkets and in train stations. This is me pictured in the York train station just a week or so before we went into lockdown. So it's something that as a fundraising team, we plan pretty much from the moment it ends every year. We start planning the next one because it is such a big appeal for the charity, and it's our kind of spotlight moment. So on Monday, the 16th of March, lockdown being imminent at that point, we had to take the difficult decision to cut the appeal short. And that was kind of the start of the loss of fundraising, of funds from fundraising events, collections. All of our shops were put on hold. And that was it for the foreseeable future, really, as with so many other charities and businesses across the country and across the world. But whilst our fundraising stopped, our services didn't. Our nurses continued to go out into the community, obviously navigating the changing guidelines and suddenly becoming frontline workers, whilst the rest of the country was told to stay at home. And this is the time, shortly after our appeal was stopped, that we launched an emergency appeal. I'll just read you a little quote here from our Chief Executive, Matthew Reid, from what he said at the time. So he said, "At this time of national emergency, Marie Curie nurses and frontline staff are needed more than ever, and the NHS is put under even greater strain. We're ready and we're geared up to help, with hospice beds and nurses on standby. Sadly, some people's lives will be shortened by coronavirus, so the need for end-of-life care will be greater. Marie Curie can meet this need, and in doing so will help free up intensive care beds needed for coronavirus patients. But just as we want to help, our income has been decimated. We need donations urgently to keep our nurses and hospice staff on the front line. At the moment, our ability to fundraise is seriously compromised. Events are being cancelled and we've had to close our shops. This is why we've launched an emergency appeal to make up the shortfall and ensure that the charity can care for more dying patients, support the NHS, and ultimately save lives in the weeks and months ahead." And so that was obviously a very uncertain time that Matthew made that comment, but we are really proud that we have supported and continue to support the pandemic and the communities the whole way through. But what does that actually look like for our nurses and for our hospice staff here in the Bradford Hospice at that point in time? So I've got a bit of an account here from one of our Marie Curie nurses, Claire, about what working on the front line was like for Marie Curie. So this account here was given in mid-April, when we had real issues with getting PPE supply, and it was a huge challenge. So Claire says that usually she'd make the 9 o'clock phone call to the family ahead of the visit, just to let them know that she was coming and to check that they still wanted the visit. Due to the pandemic, they now have to run through a whole load of questions prior to visit, and when the referral happens, and that's to ensure that the nurses have the correct PPE equipment, personal protective equipment, that they need before they can go out and make that visit. Claire says that it's really challenging because there had been a huge lack of supply coming from the NHS. As a charity, we had networks all set up across the country of our volunteers who were driving from A to B to get PPE across the country. We even actually had one of our partners, charity partners is SPA, and they set up a network with their lorries driving. They would take PPE equipment in their lorries around the country and drop them at local SPA stores so that nurses could go and pick that up to ensure they had the correct equipment to be able to go out that evening. Claire says here that as a nurse, it's really frustrating for her that she can't give the end-of-life care that she wants to, especially if someone's suspected of having COVID-19 and she doesn't have the correct PPE, she's not able to make the visit. She did say that families were really, really grateful that they were still coming in overnight, because the greatest fear is of their loved one going into hospital. So that account was in mid-April when the PPE situation was a kind of a real challenge, which added to all the devastation and worry. Our campaigning team actually set up a pre-written email for our supporters and volunteers to send out to their local MPs. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of our supporters did that, and ever since then, and ever since the supply started to become more plentiful and kind of better worked, we are now receiving weekly deliveries, which ensures that all of our nurses can have what they need to be able to make a visit. And it's that kind of cross-team working which we've seen so much of throughout this pandemic. One thing that Dr. Sarah Holmes, who is the doctor here, the lead doctor here at Bradford Hospice, she said that she, amongst all of the worry and the devastation and all of the negative aspects of everything that's happened over the last months, she said that one, beacon of hope is how people have pulled together in the team situation as well. She said that conversations she's been having for the past 3 years about our nurses being able to go into care homes to support people living with a terminal illness in care homes, that hasn't happened, even though she's tried so hard over the past 3 years. Yet now, in the middle of a pandemic, it's all happening, and we're now going into care homes to support that as well. So she said that it's crazy that the pandemic is really driving forward changes in services that she's wanted to happen for so many years. So that's amazing to see. Shall I go back onto that one? So this here is Marie Curie nurse Catherine, and I just wanted to touch on her account of what being on the front line with all that PPE on feels like, and how different it feels. Now, I know when I first read this account that Catherine had written, it was a few months ago, and it was really at a time where we weren't necessarily wearing face masks and things going out into the community if we needed to do our shopping and that kind of thing, which obviously there's a lot more of that happening now. And I think, I know some people might have been doing that the whole time, but I do think that, if you've done your supermarket shop with your face mask on the whole way round, you are ready to get it off when you get out. It does feel kind of, when you're actually doing it, it does feel very, you know, it's hard to understand how people do a 12-hour shift with the face mask, the visor, the apron, the gloves, and also have to, in the hospice, they have to obviously take that off and wash down and reapply the PPE, which really stops the pace at which they can see the patients as well. But yeah, I think reading this account now, kind of having worn my mask in Asda when I went to the supermarket, it does make you realise how invasive that is, and you know, your glasses steam up, and it's really difficult for nurses and doctors on the front line as well. One thing that Catherine says is it's really hard without the facial expressions that you would usually use, and particularly in a palliative care environment, that reassurance that you get, that you give as a Marie Curie nurse, that kind of reassuring smile and the words that you use and the, you know, the eye contact that you give, it really kind of is very difficult when you've got PPE on. Suddenly you've got a mask which covers over your mouth. People can't see your smile. People can't see your lips moving. Many, you know, patients, a lot of patients have hearing difficulties and would be lip reading, and that's then suddenly totally impossible. Another thing is when someone's got full PPE on, everybody looks the same really. I suppose height, you can kind of gauge who's who, but particularly in a hospice environment, it's very difficult to know who it is walking into your room to be there for you. So a real challenge for someone like Catherine to navigate that, and trying to do her job as best she can. So she says that it was really important to try and let patients know who the human behind the mask is. And that's something which quite nice, which came up here in the Bradford Hospice. And this is Keith here in the top picture. And he made, during the pandemic, he made something called the My Face Is campaign. And he made for everybody, Keith is actually the chaplain here at the Bradford Hospice. And he made all of the staff here these A4 pictures of them without PPE on, with them smiling. He laminated them and gave them to each nurse and doctor to kind of wear pinned to their apron as they enter a room, and then they could all be wiped down afterwards as well. And then it just means that when you're entering a room, you kind of can see that smile, and you can kind of understand who the person behind the mask is as well. So kind of little things like this that have been happening to make everything that little bit better for everybody as well. They set up, when patients weren't able to have visits from family and friends, it was a real kind of, it's an awful situation, because family and friends and loved ones might not know if they'll ever see their loved one again. Many patients here at the Bradford Hospice and across other hospices didn't have the means to be able to even make a call or that kind of thing. So we launched virtual visiting, and at the reception there is iPads which can be booked out, and people can book out a session and have a bit of training to be told how to use the relevant kind of FaceTime, that kind of thing. And families and patients could see each other again, which is amazing. I'm just conscious of time, but I'm going to just quickly talk about the support line that I mentioned earlier, where people can ring for support. So the support line demands, that's, one second, I'll move that forward, there we go. The support line, that telephone line, there was a 40% increase in calls since the outbreak of the coronavirus. So we reacted to that by increasing our opening hours to ensure that and having more people on the phones to ensure that we could answer all of those calls. many of which people worrying about the coronavirus and looking for support and guidance. We've also really encouraged healthcare professionals to use that support line to get practical and emotional support throughout the pandemic as well. And one thing that was set up from the beginning of the pandemic was a bereavement support service. It's a new service that Marie Curie launched at the start of the pandemic, and it's for people who might want to have ongoing support from the same person over the telephone if they've recently been bereaved. One thing that we're really conscious of as a charity is that there are a huge amount of people grieving in different ways and unable to kind of grieve in the ways we usually would. So that bereavement support service was set up to look out for those people and to give them someone to talk to and some way to process their grief in such a difficult time. We have matched callers with specially trained volunteers who then provide them with a regular bereavement sessions and support. And the matched volunteer provides kind of a safe space to talk and a listening ear as well. And the offer that we give is up to 6 telephone sessions, each lasting 45 minutes. So that's something that we want to really make sure people are aware of as well, so that people can access that service if they really need to as well. And then I'll just finish with one of our campaigns that we've got running at the moment, which you may have heard of. So Marie Curie's campaigning at the moment for a national day to unite in memory of all the people who have lost their lives since the lockdown began. We have found out that there may be around 300,000 people that are grieving for loved ones who have died since the UK lockdown began, whether that's a result of the coronavirus or other causes. In times of loss, it's about having your friends and family around you as a support, and that's a kind of a huge source of comfort. But right now, you know, even the smallest of gestures like giving a hug is just not possible. So we're campaigning to have a national time and a national day to reflect on our collective sense of loss, and to remember and celebrate those people who've died, as we can start to then heal from the trauma as of the national crisis. So there is a petition that you can sign here, and there's a really good video in there about grief as well. I'll also send round this link so that you can follow this campaign if it's something that you're interested in or wanting to know more about as well. So I think that's everything that I wanted to touch on, but if there's any questions or anything, then that's brilliant, I can answer those. And as I did say, I'll make sure that I share a lot of the things that I've mentioned with you, Richard, so that you can, you know, forward it on if you want to.
Yes, I certainly will, yes.
Lovely. I'll just stop sharing my screen there so that, fantastic.
Right. Good, well, thank you very much, yes.
No problem.
That was very good, thank you. That's very interesting. It certainly put Marie Curie into context for me. I hadn't realised how much organisation gets involved in, so that was very interesting. Thank you. So does anybody have anything they'd like to say, or any questions? If you do, just put your hand up. Lawrence, yes, can you just unmute yourself first, please? Lawrence, can you just unmute yourself, please?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. Emma,
Yes.
I was bowled over. I thought the presentation was absolutely vitally interesting and complete. So thank you very much. I've learned more in the last hour or so than I could ever have expected. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Lawrence.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Here, here.
And as I said, when I share those bits around with Richard, my email address, phone number, everything will be in there. So if you do, you know, reflect and want to know more, then please don't hesitate to get in touch as well.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask, if I Google you or search Marie Curie, will I get the support website?
Yeah, so it should come up, and if you put in Marie Curie information and support,
Right.
it certainly will, and it'll take you, there's one particular bit of the website that it'll take you straight to that, and on there you'll get the telephone number and all of the information as well on there.
Thank you. And final question, making donations, is there a route via what you've just described to make a donation, which I'd certainly like to do?
Oh, that's really kind, thank you. Yeah, so if you go to the main page, it's straight there as you go on. So you can, it'll kind of pop up as you go around the website. But
Right.
if you put Marie Curie in and click the top result, it'll take you straight to the website, and you can donate easily there on the website as well.
Marvellous, thank you.
Lovely. No, thank you so much.
Lawrence. Does anybody else want to say anything, or Jill? You'll just need to unmute yourself first. Okay?
Mute. That's it, I've done.
Okay.
Emma, I was just wondering, obviously there are other organisations like Macmillan. Do you coordinate with those in any way, or?
We do. There's been more coordination over recent years, actually. Our services that we offer are quite distinct, and Macmillan they have their nurses that go out into the community as well, and they operate a lot in hospitals, and their shift patterns really quite different as well. Right. But because I suppose Macmillan aren't always caring for terminally ill patients, but we do, where we're doing research and providing services there, we do join up in that sense, so that we can kind of share our findings and to try and make services as joined up as possible, which ultimately is the most important thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, thank you again, Emma, very much. That has been a very, very interesting talk, and as Lawrence said, I think we've all learned an awful lot. So thank you very much for that. And if you would like to email me the various links, I'll make sure that everybody else gets them.
I will do, yeah.
And as I mentioned in an email, we have recorded the talk, so we can make that available to those of our members who weren't able to be with us today.
Lovely.
Good.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Yes. You can't hear very much, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, well, we'll be in touch shortly about our next meeting on Zoom. But please, in the meantime, everybody keep healthy and safe, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody again next month. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.